Okay, brachial plexus 101. First thing, we're going to write down our 5 nerve roots. You combine the first 2 and the last 2, and you just draw a straight line going across. So these are your roots. You're really thirsty, drink cold beer. Where they combine are your trunks. So these are roots. These are trunks. Sorry for the handwriting. Divisions, chords, and branches. The things that we can see in lab are just these 2, because these are below the clavicle. The divisions happen right behind the clavicle, and then roots and trunks are above the clavicle, and we have not cut the neck part yet, so we can't see those yet. But these are the ones that we've seen in lab with the posterior, lateral, and medial cord, and then all their branches. So all of the posteriors, so I'll make this in red, are going to go to the C7 part, which becomes your posterior cord. So this combination right here is both anterior and posterior of C5, C6. This is anterior and posterior of C7. And this is anterior and posterior of C8, T1. So what happens is this posterior side will come down. So I'm gonna put red as posterior. And then the posterior of C8, T1 will also come up. So then this right here is just the anterior of C5, C6. This is just the anterior of C8, T1 that goes through. For C7, the posterior for it keeps going, but the anterior comes off and goes up. Just remember A is the first letter of the alphabet, so it goes to the top. That's the anterior. So if you're thinking of nerve roots, this right here has your C7's posterior. It brought down your C5 and 6 posterior, and it took the C8, T1 posterior. So this right here is the posterior of all 5 nerve roots. And that's why when we talk about the radial nerve, it's going to control everything from the backside, from top to bottom of the arm and forearm, because it has all of those nerve roots. The one on top, this right here, is just C5 and C6 because it brought it from here, and then the C7 anterior. So this is really just the anterior of C5, C6, C7. And then this right here didn't add anything, but it gave up the posterior. So this is just anterior of C8 and T1. So that's what these cords are. So let me clean this up a little bit. Okay, so this top cord, so if you think about it, this brachial plexus is just simplified to help us see what's going on. But it's really if this is your neck area and your C5, C6, blah, 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 to T1 are coming down, so if this is your clavicle, they're going to combine here. But they don't really start to split anterior posterior until right behind the clavicle. So this is where you'll get this and this and this, and then the rest will come down this, this, and then this will go to the back, and then eventually this and this, well, a little higher up than here, will combine to form your median nerve. So this is just a simplified linear, if you want to say, version of it, but it really looks like this. So this part going to the outside is your lateral cord. So this right here is lateral cord. The one on the bottom would then have to be medial cord, or close to your body. And then this one, because it has all of the posteriors, is going to be your posterior cord. So this is your, let's write it like this. This is your posterior cord. So this right here goes to the back of the arm, not to the front of the arm. The front of the arm is this one, and then this one that they combine to form. So in other words, this and this are your anterior chords, but they're split into medial and lateral, and this is your posterior chord. So when we're looking at the front of the arm, so for example, like this picture below, all of this stuff that we can see is going to be either lateral or median chord. We can't see the stuff that's going to the back of the arm because that would be the posterior chord. We need a posterior view. So this combines with this to form your median nerve. And it kind of looks like an M from the side. So that's your median nerve. The one on top is your musculocutaneous nerve. And the medial one is your ulnar nerve. The one that went to the back posterior, this is going to be your radial nerve. So the main ones are musculocutaneous, so that's this one right here, the one going lateral. So I'm going to put MSC. The one going medial is going to be your ulnar. The one in the middle posterior is going to be your radial eventually. And then when they combine, this is your median nerve. So the way they travel kind of tells us like what they're going to innervate. For the posterior chord, just remember, so for posterior, remember ultra, U-L-T-R-A. So your U is your upper subscapular, which means your L has to be your lower subscapular. Your T is your thoracodorsal. Your R is already your radial, we have that. And then your A is your axillary nerve. So that's the ultra. So upper and lower subscapular, we have a muscle right here called the subscapularis. So this is on the anterior side of the clavicle. So if you're looking at someone's back, the posterior side, when you see the spine of the scapula, you know you're on the back side of the scapula. Over the spine is supraspinatus, under is infraspinatus. Supra above, infra below. But if you turned it around and looked at it from the front side of the scapula, this entire thing is your subscapularis muscle. So because it's such a big muscle, it needs two nerves to innervate it, your upper and lower subscapularis. So upper subscapularis would do something like this side, and the lower would do something like this side, for example. Now, both of these do subscapularis muscle. So I'm going to put subscap muscle. But your lower also does your teres major. So upper only does subscapularis muscle, lower does your subscapularis muscle and your teres major. Your thoracodorsal, so thoracodorsal, I can't spell, nerve is going to innervate your latissimus dorsi, so dorse muscle. Your radial does a bunch of like the extensor muscles, so I'm just going to put E muscles, and we'll go over that in a little. And then your axillary is going to do your deltoid and your teres minor. The way I remember it is the teres major is innervated by one that does like a smaller part of a muscle. So it does part of the subscapularis, then it does a big muscle like the teres major. Your axillary does a big muscle like your deltoid, and then a smaller part or smaller muscle like the teres minor. I don't know if that helps. I could just be dumb. But, okay, that's your posterior chord. That's done. Your median chord is going to have 3 lines, and this is easy because it's literally all median, median, median. So, you have a medial pectoral nerve. And if you have a medial pec, then automatically we can go to the lateral chord and we can write down the lateral pec. So these are all nerves, obviously, because they're in your brachial plexus. So you have a medial pec that's on your median chord, lateral pec that's on your lateral chord. Sorry, this is medial chord. I don't know why I keep saying median chord. Before someone fights me in the chat. Medial cord. This is median nerve. Everything, whenever there's a lateral, there's a medial. So there's lateral pec, there's a medial pec. There's lateral cord, there's a medial cord. Median nerve is just the name of that one nerve when they combine. So the other two medials are, you have a, this is getting way too messy. So you have a medial brachial cutaneous, and then a medial antebrachial cutaneous. So cutaneous just means skin. So this means that this nerve or this cord has two branches that give sensory, so to your skin sensation in the medial brachial. So brachial just means arm, so it'll do the skin of the upper arm. And then antebrachial, anti just means forearm. So antebrachial will do the skin of this part, and then brachial will do the skin. Oh, it's literally right there. I'm so dumb. So forearm and arm. Okay. Now, if they only give medial, that means something has to give for lateral, and that's where the musculocutaneous comes in. So this right here, this nerve does, so it's musculo and cutaneous. So it does the muscles of upper arm. So that's right here, your coracobrachialis, your biceps, and your brachialis. But once it gets past this part right here and goes down to the forearm, it does lateral cutaneous, so skin of forearm. So it does muscles of the upper arm and then lateral cutaneous, or skin of the forearm. Now, the only other thing we have is when these C5 and C6 go together, the first thing they do is they give off these two branches. And if you think about where these are happening, if you're going to give off branches before you even divide, because remember, this division happens behind the clavicle. So if you're going to give off branches behind, it has to be some muscle that's like higher up that it's controlling. So this right here is your subclavius, which is literally like right under your clavicle. So it's the subclavius nerve. It supplies the subclavius muscle. And then the other one is your suprascapular nerve that supplies your supraspinatus muscle. So suprascapular goes to supraspinatus, subclavius goes to subclavius. For the medial and lateral pec, so we have a pec major and a pec minor. It makes sense that the major, the bigger muscle, is going to need more nerves. So both the both the lateral pec and the medial pec supply the pec major. To remember which one supplies the pec minor, just remember M for minor, M for major, M for medial. So your medial pec, let's do here. So medial pec is major and minor, and then lateral pec is just major. And the last thing, your C5, C6, and C7 also combine, so it's really something like this. But to make this even less messier than it already is, I'm going to do it on the side. So 5, 6, and 7 combined, and they give off this nerve called the long thoracic nerve. And this innervates your serratus anterior muscle. And the easy way to remember this is just if you remember SALT. So SA is serratus anterior. LT is long thoracic. So serratus anterior is innervated by your long thoracic nerve. And that is the entire brachial plexus. So now we talked about what most of these branches do, but we didn't talk about the main ones. So your main ones are really your ulnar, your median, your musculocutaneous, and your radial. Musculocutaneous, we said, does the muscles of the anterior upper arm and the skin of the lateral forearm. Now the rest of them do this. So if we're looking at the, actually let's do the flexor side first. If we're looking at the flexors, so this is the anterior forearm. These are all going to be median nerve, except with two exceptions. So the flexor carpi ulnaris is actually ulnar nerve. Let me do this in a different color. Ulnar nerve. And then the profundus, so the profundus runs deep and goes all the way to your distal phalanges. So if you split this in half, you have this half and this half. So the side on your pinky is the half that the ulnar nerve does. The other half would just be median or deep median when we go over it. So your flexors. You have 4 superficial flexors, and if you kind of draw your, like if you put your hand the way they kind of were shown in that video, where if you put your thumb here, and then 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3 fingers, 4 fingers. Sorry, this is an awful hand. So that's kind of how the muscles run. So you have your pronator teres first, then your flexor carpi radialis, palmaris longus, and if you're going to have a flexor carpi radialis, you also are going to have an ulnaris. This has to do with like the bones. So this is the radial bone side. This is the ulnar bone side. So that's why they're named that way. So those are your 4 superficial ones, and these are all median nerve. Your flexor digitorum superficialis. So this right here is like a deeper cut than this. And this is right here, this is like the deepest cut. So this is like when the other 2 pictures are removed. So if we remove this layer and remove this layer, we'll end up with these. So if you removed the first layer and now you're in the intermediate layer, that's your flexor digitorum for superficialis. That goes all the way, but stops right here. So it actually like branches, it gets like 2 little heads like this. So it goes all the way through, and that will stop here, here, and here. And then your profundus, the deep one, is the one that actually runs through all the way to the end. So your flexor digitorum superficialis is also median nerve. These right here, these 3, are all deep median. So deep median nerve, aka AIN, or anterior interosseous, I probably spelled that wrong, nerve. So when your median nerve goes deep, and the way you think about it is, the more superficial your median nerve is, the higher up in the forearm it's going to innervate. So your forearm muscles are superficial median, but the deeper you go down your arm, so into your fingers, the deeper the nerve is. So when we get to the fingers and the thumb and all that stuff, that's deep median or anterior interosseous nerve. So that's your profundus, your pronator quadratus, and your flexor pollicis longus. So digits, thumb, as we get deeper. Now, with the extensors, kind of similar, there's just a little more. So you have 7 superficial and 5 deep. For these, brachioradialis is kind of weird because it's a radial nerve, but it's a flexor. So it technically should be on the other side, but it does run with like these and it has the same innervation. So all of these, because these are on the back side, remember from your posterior cord, these are all radial nerve. And when you go deeper, deep radial, if the deep median was called anterior interosseous, this is just going to be posterior interosseous nerve. So the way I remember it is the deep ones are they sit deep. So your supinator, your index finger, so extensor, indicus, the one that literally goes to your index finger, and all the thumb ones. So pollicis just means thumb. So you have an abductor, one that abducts your thumb, pollicis longus, and then you have two extensors, a shorter one, brevis, like short, brief, and then longus, long. If you remember, it's always a brevis sandwich. The brevis is always going to be between your two longus. So that's kind of a way to remember it. So these are all deep radial or posterior interosseous nerve, and then the rest all do superficial. They're very similar. A few differences are that you have two different radialis here and two different pollices, whereas here you just have one radialis and one pollicis. The other difference is that here you split your digitorums into a superficialis and a profundus, but here it's just one extensor digitorum. And the reason for that is because some fingers start to get their own specific ones. So you have an extensor for your, sorry, not that one. You have an extensor for your mini-me digit, which is like your pinky. You also have an extensor for your index finger, indicus, and then a bunch of stuff for like thumb. So that's why you have more muscles here compared to the other one. You have one supinator, but you have two pronators. You technically do have two supinators. The other supinator is higher up in the arm, and it's a strong one. It's your biceps brachii. So that's a key thing that she might ask. But yeah, all of these are all radial nerve. All of these are all median nerve. The deeper you get, it's deep median. The deeper you get for radial, it's deep radial. And then you can kind of see the muscles over here. The superficial ones are these 7, so anconeus, ulnaris, mini-me, digitorum, radialis, longus and brevis, and then brachiradialis. So I tried to write them like the order they go in. So you have your brachiradialis first, then your extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, then your digitorum, then your ulnaris, and then mini-me. Well, mini-me technically before ulnaris. And then anconeus is this little thing on the side that no one cares about. And then when you go deeper, you can see this is the brevis sandwich right here. So you have this is brevis. It's brief, it's short, compared to your longus, which is longer. And then the other one, so this is your abductor. It'll come down here. And then your index and supinator. So if you remember sit, so supinator, index, and then the 3 that do the thumb, those are deep. And I think that's it.